Within all of Disney history, there's one period that most people don't know about. Let's dig into the history of how a post-Depression Disney almost went bankrupt and the strike that nearly crippled the company. In 1938, the US economy was recovering from the Great Depression and workers were pushing hard for higher wages and increased job security. This led to a rise in the establishment of labor unions across the United States, including the Screen Cartoonist Guild, which I will refer to as the SCG for the rest of the episode. The SCG was led by Herbert Sorrell in 1941, and he was able to sign nearly every major animation studio except for one, Walt Disney Productions. Earlier in the 1930s, Walt Disney Productions was well known for being one of the best animation companies in terms of employee pay and benefits. They even split 20% of each of their films' profits among their employees as bonuses, but suspended that program in 1936 with the release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The profits from that film were put directly into a new studio complex in Burbank instead, angering longtime employees of the studio. To make matters worse, this new studio was more hierarchical than before. New luxuries such as a gym, steam room, and restaurant were only made available to those near the top of the food chain, while the common employee couldn't even afford lunch in the cafeteria. This studio move and general employee discontent occurred right around the time that Herbert Sorrell was head of the SCG, which made Disney his final but biggest goal among the Southern California animation studios. The SCG was able to recruit several Disney animators when the commercial failures of Fantasia and Pinocchio widened the already massive pay gap at the studio. Among those that joined the SCG was animation legend Art Babbitt. Even though Babbitt was among the highest paid at the studio, he wasn't discreet about his displeasure with Walt Disney himself. He was deeply unhappy with the relatively pitiful salary that some of his colleagues were earning and became a vocal member of the SCG. Needless to say, Walt wasn't happy about this. In 1941, he delivered this speech to the entire company. "I have always felt and always will feel that the men that contribute most to the organization should, out of respect alone, enjoy some privileges. My first recommendation to the lot of you is this: put your own house in order. You can't accomplish a damn thing by sitting around and waiting to be told everything. If you're not progressing as you should, instead of grumbling and growling, do something about it." Many of the employees simply walked out during the speech in anger, and Disney saw a large rise in the number of employees joining the SCG. This caused tensions between Walt and Babbitt to boil over, and resulted in Babbitt's termination due to union activities in 1941. The next day, over 200 employees went on strike. The strike lasted for 5 weeks and ended when Walt Disney was encouraged to briefly leave the country as a goodwill ambassador to Latin America. His absence allowed the strike to settle with a federal mediator who found in favor of the SCG across the board. This victory eased employee tensions, but it only magnified Disney's financial struggles at the time. A few months later, the US was drawn into World War II with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Walt wasn't enthusiastic about joining the war effort at first, but ended up creating propaganda films when he was offered a 32-film contract. The company also produced a couple of non-propaganda package films during the war, but neither were a huge success. When the war ended, Disney was still struggling financially. It was then that Walt decided to gamble it all on one $3 million picture, Cinderella. The budget for this film was so relatively large that it necessitated a big success at the box office, or the studio would again face bankruptcy. Cinderella was released theatrically nationwide on March 4th, 1950, after a limited release in Boston on February 15th. Audiences loved the film, and the box office returns were high enough to put the studio squarely back on track. So, what do you think? Is Walt Disney on the right side of history with the animators' strike, or was Art Babbitt? Would you like an episode that focuses just on Walt Disney's wartime propaganda efforts, or one just on Cinderella? Let us know in the comments below, and subscribe for more episodes of Disney Declassified.